It's my honor and very great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Mr. Kevin Gover, Director of the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., with its branch museum in New York City. When NAMI opened 10 years ago, September of 2004, it was a momentous event for the nation, certainly for all of us in the field. It was a conclusion of a 15-year effort by a great many people, and the beginning of a new institution founded upon the great collection of George Gustav High and dedicated to the presentation of Native American arts and culture from a Native perspective. For everyone who was there that day, it was a moving experience, not only the opportunity to see the long-awaited museum, but also to witness the great procession of American Indian peoples that began the opening ceremonies. More than 25,000 Native Americans from throughout the Americas, representing at least 500 different tribes, nations, communities, walked from the Smithsonian's castle to the new museum adjacent to the United States Capitol building. It was an extraordinary event. It was extraordinary visually, of course, emotionally, and it was an extraordinary event symbolically. It affirmed that at its very beginning, the National Museum of the American Indian was more than a collection of objects. Rather, it was conceived and remains today a center for Native peoples of the Western Hemisphere dedicated to advancing knowledge and understanding of their languages, literature, history, and arts. The National Museum of the American Indian also stands as our own national symbol, honoring Native Americans as the original ancestors of this land. In 2007, Kevin Gover was appointed the museum's second director, succeeding W. Richard West. Mr. Gover is a member of the Pawnee Nation, and before his appointment distinguished himself in the fields of law, Indian reform, as an author, educator, and policy specialist, serving variously in the public, private, and academic realms. Mr. Gover received his Juris Doctorate degree from the University of New Mexico's School of Law and his bachelor's degree in Public and International Affairs from the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University. Following law school, he entered the private sector in Washington, where he specialized in representing Indian tribes, tribal agencies, and Alaska Native corporations. He followed this by establishing a small law firm in New Mexico, specializing in federal Indian law. This firm subsequently grew into the largest Indian-owned law firm in the country. In 1997, Mr. Gover was nominated by President Clinton to serve as Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs in the Department of the Interior. As senior executive, he was responsible for policy and operational oversight of the Bureau of Indian Affairs for programs in Indian education, law enforcement, social services, treaty rights, and trust asset managements, and he is recognized for bringing critically important advances in all of these areas. He's also recognized for crafting the apology on behalf of the Bureau of Indian Affairs to the nation's Indian communities for a history of past wrongs. Leaving office in 2003, he joined the faculty as professor of law at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University, where he served until his appointment at NAMI. The express mission of the National Museum of the American Indian has been to present the Native American viewpoint, from the design of the building and grounds to exhibitions, interpretation, and programming. The museum, from its beginnings, has emerged as a significant force, giving tangible form to the presence and diversity of Native American peoples, resulting in many non-Native museums, including our own, throughout the country, reassessing the ways in which their own collections of Native arts are shown and interpreted. Since his arrival as director, Kevin Gover has expanded and intensified the museum's role as America's foremost Native American voice in the arts, and he's done this without compromising the original vision. Indeed, he has built upon it and expanded it. He's provided inspired and innovative leadership, which is now widely recognized. He holds a broad awareness of a multitude of Native traditions and oral traditions, and at the same time integrating these with conventional scholarship in moving the Museum of the American Indian to status as a world-class museum with international visibility. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Gover.
Well, good evening, everyone. That may be the kindest introduction I've ever had. I'm not sure I can live up to all of that. But it is very nice to be here, very nice of all of you to be here this evening. I want to thank the Nelson-Atkins, thank Julian for the invitation to be here. Thanks, Stefan, for the great idea to assemble this exhibition, and the equally great idea to ask Gaylord to curate the exhibition. And then, of course, to thank Gaylord for his outstanding work on this exhibition and many others. Gaylord is very well respected in our world for his knowledge of American Indian art, and is one of the first people we call upon when we need somebody smart to say something to an important audience. So it's very good to be here. The National Museum of the American Indian was established by Congress in 1989. And that means that this year will mark the 25th anniversary of the establishment of that museum. We opened our first museum in New York City 5 years later, in 1994. We opened our Cultural Resources Center in Suitland, Maryland in 1999. So this is the 15th anniversary of that. And finally, as Gaylord shared, we opened our museum on the National Mall in Washington 10 years ago this coming Sunday. And so this is our 10th year. And one of the things that my predecessor, Rick West, set out to do was to really change how museums worked with Native American material. We had all had the experience of seeing Native American art and history presented in museums across the country. And somehow it left most of us as Indian people a little cold. It felt like in some respects the museums weren't trying very hard to understand the material. And so it's particularly good to be here at the Nelson-Atkins because it has shown such important leadership among these comprehensive art museums. For example, by establishing, as far as I know, the first American Indian Art Department in 2001 in a comprehensive art museum. The American Indian galleries here are the largest in the business, and I would include our museum in that because we don't always keep our galleries committed necessarily to contemporary Native art, but here at the Nelson-Atkins you do. And then to make the Native American material a part of the broader artistic traditions of North America is an extraordinarily important step, and we're beginning to see museums across the country follow that lead. For example, in my old hometown of Norman, Oklahoma, the Fred Jones Museum has made a major acquisition of a major collection of mostly modern and contemporary art, and they too have chosen to put that art within other forms of art, American art, and just say, this too is art. The art museums in Denver and Seattle have produced magnificent shows within the last couple of years of particular forms of Native American art. Not so much making the point that they are native as just saying that this is outstanding artwork. And we believe this is how it should be done. You know, for many years, it's no secret that many attempts were made to erase the native heritage of the United States. But it won't be erased. It can't be. And in no small part because Indians won't permit it to be. What you'll see in this new exhibition on Plains Indian art is, first of all, that Native American art has a very deep history in the Plains. A couple of objects of 1,000 years old and longer are presented. And it's stunning to see that some of the ideas contained in these very old pieces are then repeated at the end of the exhibition in the contemporary portion. The exhibition shows the powerful aesthetic and the commitment to excellence of these Plains artists. It also shows us how works of art tell us who people are, what was important to them, even in their darkest hours. We were talking today at the radio station, and one of the things that we began to talk about was how even in the very darkest period of Native American history, from around 1870, 1880, until very near the middle of the 20th century, this was a time when the United States, as official policy, was trying to destroy Native people's identity as Indians or as citizens of their tribal nations. The boarding schools were in full swing. Indian kids were being captured from the reservations and sent far away from their parents to go to school to be taught not to be Indians. Indian religions were being suppressed. The children would be punished if they spoke their native language. Tribal governance systems were suppressed and destroyed. And reservation life was completely under the thumb of Bureau of Indian Affairs superintendents. And for all of that, after their way of life had been destroyed, after everything that they knew, and all the ways that they had chosen to live were taken away from them, what did they do? They created art. And you're going to see that art in this exhibition. And it's not just any art, it is magnificent. And that's an extraordinary statement, not just about who Indian people are, but how resilient, how extraordinary human beings can be. That in these times when all was lost, they made art in order to express still who they were. And that in turn tells us how culture persists and how identity persists through time. No matter what we are. We choose to say, we are this. This is who we are. And nothing can really change that. Now, I think the organization of this exhibition also tells us something important about museums. It is of no small import to me that the Quai Branly chose to organize this exhibition. We haven't seen much interest in Europe in Native American art as art. We've seen some exhibitions that make attempts at explaining Native American history. I haven't found them to be particularly insightful. But here we have Plains art chosen simply because of its aesthetic quality. I also think the Quai Branly made an extraordinarily good choice in bringing Gaylord onto the project because he has, in many ways, led the effort to show how this material should be worked with, how it should be respected, how it should be displayed, how it should be interpreted. And in every case, working with Native people to deepen his understanding of what this material represents. And that, as well, the Nelson-Atkins is one of the leaders in its outreach to the Native communities, always involving them in their understanding of this material, in their scholarship, and in their collecting practices. And then the idea that this is going to the Met is no small matter. The Met has not led the way, shall we say, in the presentation of Native American art over very many years. And yet they saw something in this particular subject and this particular exhibition that made them want to present it in their magnificent museum. And perhaps this is the first of many such exhibitions that will make their way into what is, after all, the premier American art museum. So there's a lot to be happy about for the National Museum of the American Indian in the success of this exhibition. Through these efforts, Native art is taking its place in the grand discourse about human creativity. And that's really what we wanted to see. We applaud these efforts, and we're very grateful for the friendship and the good work of these institutions. As for the NMAI, we of course will continue in both New York and Washington to present contemporary Native art, but we are about to assume a new emphasis and really begin to focus on public history. What we find is that we did a review of the textbooks that are in use across the country and what is being said, what is being taught to students in the United States about American Indian history. And at best we can say that it's incomplete. At worst we can say it's really fundamentally wrong. And the reason it's wrong is that it's the same thing that was being taught to all of us when we were in school. It's a very simplistic narrative that's robbed of all its fullness and all of its richness and all of its complexity. And so students today are learning, as we all learned, that the Pilgrims were helped by the friendly Indian Squanto who taught them how to grow corn. They're being taught that the Indian princess Pocahontas saved John Smith from being executed by her savage father in Jamestown. And problem is, those things just aren't true, really. And the contemporary scholarship is telling us it's just not true. And so why is it still being taught? I mean, we're very curious about that. And we're actually working on an exhibition that I'm going to enjoy a great deal called Americans, that really asks that question. We say, why do we all believe this? And of all the stories there are that might have been chosen to explain Native American history and in the context or American history in the context of Native Americans, why are these the stories we chose? You know what they are. It's Thanksgiving, Pocahontas, the Trail of Tears, Little Bighorn. That's about it. And Indians, of course, as you all know, disappeared after 1876 and were never heard from again. We think there's a lot to be done with that, and we're willing to meet people where they are. And so we're going to explore those very subjects and ask that question. Why these stories, of all the really phenomenal stories, phenomenally interesting, phenomenally complex, phenomenally heroic stories that we might have chosen, why are these the ones that are so sticky? We don't have answers for that yet. The curators are hard at work, and hopefully we'll have something important to say. But our point is this. There are so many parts of so many governments that have enormous authority over the welfare of American Indian people. Far too much authority, in my opinion. And that authority is being exercised by people who were taught about Pocahontas, Thanksgiving, Little Bighorn, and the Trail of Tears. Should any of us be surprised if they were to get it wrong from time to time? And what I talk to the tribal leaders about is imagine a day when most of the people you work with, most of the people who have authority to make decisions that affect your communities, actually had a better understanding of the history between the United States and the American Indian nations. Would that be a good thing? And needless to say, they all say yes. So we've started down this new road, and we're not going to limit it to the galleries. We will make every effort to move this material into school classrooms across the United States. We know that teachers are teaching about this. We know that they want to do it well. We know that they don't really know where to start. And so as a Smithsonian Museum, we feel a responsibility to see if we can't fill that gap, provide the teachers with the information they need, and lead students to a deeper, better understanding than we were left with when we graduated from high school. That effort begins this weekend, in fact, with the opening of our new exhibition, Nation to Nation, United States Treaties with the American Indian Nations. It's a new endeavor for us to attempt public history, but it's one that we're obviously very excited about. And it's one that I'm more and more convinced. I mean, I wasn't a museum guy before I came to this job. But I'm more and more convinced that museums may not just be a good place for this kind of work to proceed, but the very best places for this kind of work to be done. When we're unencumbered by all the limitations that are placed on the other learned institutions of our country, museums really still continue to enjoy a privileged place and an unusual freedom to explore subjects that, that most people might shy away from. So we're very grateful, not just for that opportunity and not just that tradition in the museum world, but especially for folks like you who make it possible for us to do this kind of work, who share your enthusiasm, share your knowledge, and of course, share your money with us. Because without you, we wouldn't have the nerve to do most of the things that we do. So thank you very much for being here tonight. Enjoy this exhibition. It is magnificent.